Have you ever wondered how to make gluten-free bread? Well, today at Kitchen Time with Dad, we're going to show you how. Hey friends, we're so glad that you could join us today in our kitchen. Today in Kitchen Time with Dad, I have
Hannah.
And tell them what we're going to make today, Hannah.
Gluten-free sandwich bread.
When we first went gluten-free, we struggled with no more sandwich bread. What do? We enjoyed our sandwiches, whether it's peanut butter and jelly or grilled cheese, you name it. But gluten-free sandwich bread was so expensive, and so we just went without. One day I finally said, there's enough recipes, there's got to be one we can try, and we tried some, and this was our favorite one. Really easy, really simple to make. Hannah, why don't you tell them about our first step that we do right away?
This is our yeast mixture. 1.5 cups of water, 2.5 teaspoons of yeast, and a quarter cup of honey.
So you take that, and this honey is, yes, the sweetener for the dish, but it is also the sugar that can help proof the yeast. And so you take that and you get it mixed up. You do it right away so that you have plenty of time for it to proof while the rest of it is being mixed up together. We often will take our whisk then to get it whisked up real good so that that yeast gets mixed up in there and the honey gets mixed in there real well. Sometimes it'll bubble up pretty high. We keep our yeast in the fridge. We buy it in big packs. But once you get it mixed up, you just want it to set about 5 to 10 minutes. Enough time for it to proof, just to make sure indeed it's going to work. So here we've got our yeast mixture all mixed in. We're going to set it aside for 5 to 10 minutes just so it proofs. We have 2 other steps: the flour, or all the dry ingredients, and then the wet ingredients. It doesn't make a difference whatever order you want to mix them up in. We just do them in separate bowls. That way they're all taken care of, and then we add all 3 in together at the end. Hannah, before you start, why don't you tell them what we put into our dry ingredients?
Gluten-free flour, xanthum gum, baking powder, and salt.
With the flour blend, that's the blend we make. You can find that here on our channel. Another recipe, we'll reference that, but it's real easy to make. We make it ahead of time, and so now we've got that. How much flour do we have in there, Hannah?
3 cups.
Okay, so we put all 3 cups of our flour in there, and our flour does include xanthum gum, but the recipe calls for some extra xanthum gum. How much is in there?
1.5 teaspoons of xanthum gum.
And we've got that in there. You want to be careful if you get it all over your counter. It does make a mess. The baking powder, we've got 4 teaspoons of that in there. And then our sea salt. We dump that right in there, and then you can either
There's 1 teaspoon of that.
Okay, yeah, so there's 1 teaspoon of the sea salt, and whether it's a whisk or whether it's a wooden spoon, whatever you want to use, you just get that mixed up in there. And we've got our dry ingredients all mixed up. We're going to go ahead and mix up our wet. Tell them what ingredients we have to put into our wet ingredients.
Lemon juice, coconut oil, and 2 eggs.
And what other kind of oils do we use sometimes
Olive
in place?
oil.
Okay. Yeah, pretty much olive oil or coconut oil. You could use melted butter if you want to do that as well.
2 teaspoons of lemon juice.
Okay. And how much of the oil was there?
A quarter cup of the oil.
Great. So we've got that. There's not much in the bottom of the bowl yet. And then we have our eggs, 2 of those eggs. Go ahead and crack those. And we have our eggs cracked, and often you have to go wash your hands. So we're going to go ahead and wash our hands. We've washed our hands, and we're going to go ahead and whisk up our eggs with the oil and the lemon juice that's in there. Then all that's got to be done is mix that into the dry ingredients, and then we mix our yeast mixture that is proofing right now into all the ingredients at the same time. We've got it all mixed up together here, and now we're going to go ahead and just dump that into our flour blend that we have with all the other ingredients. And it has been a while, about 5 minutes, that our yeast has proofed. And now what we've got is the yeast mixture. We're going to go ahead and dump that in as well, and then mix it all up so that we can set it aside in the bread pan to rise. There's the yeast mixture. We generally try to let our bread rise about how long?
20 minutes.
About 20 minutes. You can let it rise a little less than that or a little more. You don't want to do an awful lot more. We've ended up a lot of times with hollow bread. It's risen too much that it just couldn't sustain it. So we generally try to keep it at 20 minutes. We also preheat the oven at that point to 375 degrees. Then we stick it in the oven. So Hannah's mixing it up real well. You can do this with an electric mixer. Maybe you've got a KitchenAid mixer that you'd like to do this with. We just do it with a wooden spoon. We enjoy it. It's pretty easy, pretty simple stuff to mix together. We've got it all mixed up together. This is the consistency that you want it to be. It is not a normal bread dough consistency. I know that. It can be confusing at first, but again, with the gluten-free breads, it's a very different dough. Before we put our bread in our bread pan, we always grease it. What we often use is just a little bit of coconut oil or olive oil, whatever we're using that day. Just smear it along the bottom inside of the pan. And that is enough so that the bread does not stick. We don't have a problem with it sticking if we grease the pan real good with those healthy fats. Go ahead and we will start dumping that mixture in the pan. When we get it in the pan, we let it raise, like I said, 20 minutes. But before we let it raise, we take the spatula and put a little line through the top of it. We'll show you how we do that, just so that it kind of separates, kind of like a loaf bread that you buy would be separated a little bit at the top. Helps it to bake evenly at the top and in the middle. That way it gets all finished there. You just kind of have to spread it around in the pan. Again, it's different than regular bread dough. You make it move where you want it to move. If it gets too lumpy at the top and you don't want that, you want it real smooth, you can put a little bit of water on the top of your spatula and or on your hand and just run it across the top and it'll smooth it right down. Once you get it to the smoothness that you would like it at the top, you just draw a little line through the center, like I said, at the top, and go from there. Now what we do is we're going to go ahead and move to the oven. We don't generally cover our bread when we let it raise. You can let it raise that way. Generally, we just put it just like this on top of the oven at 375 degrees. So, Hannah, if you want to preheat the oven, we can put this right there. So we've got the bread over on the oven. We'll let it raise here, and we'll be back to show you how we put it in and do the rest of our baking process with our bread. We're ready to go ahead and throw our bread in. Hannah, how long do we bake that for?
44 minutes.
We bake it for 44 minutes. If you want to put a tinfoil tent over it, halfway in between, just because it's getting too dark for you, go ahead and do that. We bake it the whole time without a tent. So we'll go ahead and throw that in the oven, and we'll bake it there. And when it's finished, we pull it out, and we'll show you that at the end. As you can see, it's baked real well. We're glad that it's done. We let it sit in the pan for about 10 minutes. You can set it on a trivet or you can set it on a rack, whatever you want to do to let it cool. We let it sit at least 10 minutes in the pan. Sometimes we'll leave it overnight and cut it the next morning. We often use an electric knife to cut it, but if you let it cool completely, you could use just a regular bread knife. We love our gluten-free sandwich bread. Hope you enjoy it too. Would you let us know if you've had any troubles with making gluten-free bread in the past? This is a pretty easy loaf to make. We enjoy it, make it quite a bit. In fact, Hannah is our bread maker here. But if you ever had issues making gluten-free bread, let us know in the comments. We'd love to talk and have some communication going back and forth with others as part of the community of what goes on with gluten-free bread. This one's great. Thanks so much for joining us today on Kitchen Time with Dad. Remember, healthy food for happy families. See you next time. Our bed is broken. Okay.